Okay, here we go. Step 2, take 2, y'all. Hello, welcome. This is Facebook Live on Day of the Dead. We are going to be honoring our ancestors, and hopefully I have a wonderful guest. Let's see if I can bring her on. I'm doing this for the first time on my phone. It's quite scary because, it's that time of year that you want to kind of overcome your fears, honoring what is on the other side of the veil. So I am Ayah Buonaugrio. Some call me Reverend Ayah now. I opened Obsidian Womb, Embodied Path of the Priestess, and I'm here to just advocate, educate, and empower you to make healthy, informed decisions about your life, to connect with your ancestors, and to embody a more healthy, free, sovereign life. And so we do that by honoring the cycles of the year. For this moment, I'll say, though, this is not going the way I planned because I invited a friend to be my interviewee. But what I want to say is, if you haven't created a relationship to those on the other side, to your ancestors, or to those beings that you can call out to, some of them you might know, you don't know, you maybe already have a connection with. Let me know if you're here and that you have a connection relationship to your ancestors. Now, I'm going to share with you how to create a shrine, how to work with the ancestors for intergenerational healing. And I think what I want to start with is a little story about Sawain. Now, Sawain, hi Tamara, you're back. There we go. I get to bring you on camera. Add you. Here we go. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I am fantastic. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you okay. So everybody, this is Dr. Tamara Rose. She is a womb priestess, a healer. She works with the ancestors on the other side daily. She has some wisdom to impart on us today in this beautiful Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead, the day of honoring those that come from the other side. I have witnessed from the moment I met you that you're like, oh, I need to go convene with my ancestors. I'll get back to you on that question. And so I love that about you. I can feel it. I can feel that you are guided by those beings on the other side. Each and every day they speak to you. And so that's what, like, I want more of that. And I'm sure that everybody that's here wants to know how they can be guided, and maybe not guided by the wisdom that they can retrieve from those that they know or don't know on the other side, and to be able to utilize that relationships to not only guide their life purpose, but to also heal what I know is intergenerational trauma. Right, intergenerational wounds is epigenetics. It's the biological basis for how we actually can pass down trauma through generations, through our genes. It's hereditary, like why we might act certain things out in our life that don't feel like our own impulses, but can actually start to take over. So the purpose of kind of the call today and the meeting and the invitation for you to join us is to really discover how you can deepen this relationship to those that you have lost, that maybe you're grieving, to those that you don't know are on the other side, and also to like healing those deep, stubborn wounds and pain points in your life. Would you like to introduce yourself, Tamara?
Yeah, hi. Again, I think you did it so beautifully. I am Dr. Tamara. I have been in this field of womb healing and women's wellness and just mental health and therapy for over 30 years now. I know it's my soul's purpose. I know it's my calling. It's my gift as well. And there's nothing in this world that I love doing more than the work that I do. Over the years, I will say that it has shifted and it continues to shift as I shift and grow and transcend and become all that I am and incarnated into this particular physical realm to do and be right. And so, it's been a blessing. It's been a journey. It's painful. It's been messy. It's been deep. It's been dark. It's been fun. It's been enlightening. It's been very,
Thank you. Yeah, it's all of that. It's working in the shadows and retrieving the medicine of our own darkness. And I believe if we can do that willingly, then we don't have to fall prey fall prey to the subconscious mind and to like the murky subconscious parts of ourselves that fall prey to habits, you know, and things that take over. So if we can do that consciously, go into the shadows and, you know, honor those places, then we can retrieve wisdom. With that said, I want to open, and then I want to actually ask you some questions, but I want to open and just talk a little bit about Samhain, or there's different origins to this time of the year. And, you know, the Celtics, those ancient ones that reigned the areas of Ireland, and some of them, you know, were in the British Isles. I have some ancestry out there. And so this time of year, or perhaps last night, Halloween, All Hallows Eve, was referred to as Samhain. Okay, and Samhain, some say Samhain, but Samhain, I believe, is a proper pronunciation for it. And I really think there's a lot of taboo. Like, a lot of people are, first of all, we're partying hard on Halloween. It's like this thing we look up, we get excited to dress up and party, or like consume sugar and alcohol. And a lot of us don't even understand why. We were just used to doing that, or we're used to dressing up scary and trick-or-treating and eating a bunch of candy. But like, when I was a little kid, nobody told me why, and I didn't actually seek to understand why. I was just like, yay, it's Halloween, right? And so I want to talk a little bit like, where did that all come from real quick? Because I feel it's important to understand and honor the origins of what has maybe been misconstrued in this culture in this day and age, right? Because if we get it right, then we can start to honor it, and that energy can come and bless us and give us instructions. So it's not just about creating an altar to honor your ancestors, which I've done and we're going to do. But I feel like coming back to the origins is important, whether you have Celtic roots or Mexican or old, you know, there's different cultures in the world. Understand that this time of year, the veils are thin and you can honor those. There's a way to honor our ancestors, those that have passed before us, teachers, mentors, people that we have loved. So in Samhain, in old Celtic Isles, the origins of Samhain actually means last feast, and also represented the new year. So interestingly, this time of year of autumn, where we're going into more darkness as opposed to more light, you know, going into the winter months, this is time of year that you would actually gather the very last of your crop. So last harvest, like anything that you've been growing through the summer, you cultivate. So you gather the last of your crops that you've produced throughout the year, because we used to all eventually, at one point, most of us grew our own food, or were connected to those that provided our food. It was very like farm to table hundreds of years ago. With that said, it was understood that once you gathered all of the last of the food, that you were to have a big feast, and you were to invite in your ancestors, those that were on the other side of the veil. I'm already getting chills, I don't know why. But and here is the understanding of this last feast, was that if it was not for those who walked before you, you would not have this abundance and knowledge of agriculture that you have today. And so to honor those, and so there would be plates left out for each of the ancestors, or each of those who had maybe passed, that you wanted to honor. And so you offered them the plates. And then also, if people were to come, sometimes there were people less fortunate, and they'd come to your door begging, trick or treat, all right? And so it was considered bad luck if you were to turn anybody away that wanted to come and be part of your feast. If you were not to share in the abundance, then it was kind of like, you know, I don't want to say evil, but no, it was more like it was more known that, like, kind of superstitious wise, that you might not receive the blessings for the next year to come. So anybody that was to come to your door and knock and say, hey, do you have any food for me? You know, can I join in the feast? Your job was to welcome them open-heartedly and to have more than enough to share. And so in that, you got the kind of idea of trick-or-treating came about, right? Knocking on the doors, hey, hello, can I join you? So then everybody would circle around the table. There'd be prayers and acknowledgments for those ancestors that we wanted to honor and invite in. And there's a celebration, because it's a new year. It's a time of honoring where we came from, and we're opening up to a new cycle, because now that the last harvest has come, there's this full cycle of death and returning from whence we came from. last few things. Why were there jack-o'-lanterns, and why are there people wearing ghostly costumes? You know, like why this? Well, from what I understand about that is that the jack-o'-lanterns, because you know there's like cultivating a harvest of pumpkins, the scary faces on the jack-o'-lanterns were to keep away the unwanted spirits. They're like, we don't want you here. If you're calling in your ancestor from the other side, you might have a whole crowd of other beings that want to come through as well, right? And you do not need to let them in. It's not your job to let the whole underworld into your home, because then they're going to be dancing all night. But so your job was just to invite in your loved ones and to keep out the unwanted spirits, okay? And then at the end of the night, somebody would be appointed to go to the kind of like the edge of town, you know, go off into the distance, and they would wear like a white sheet over their head, dress up kind of as a ghost, and supposedly all the spirits would follow that person to the end of the town, and they'd blow out the candle, and it would release the spirits back from whence they came from. So it is, you have the origins of Halloween and all of those different pieces that made their way here to the Americas. So that's the Celtic origins, because that's a little bit about where I come from. I have some ancestries and roots there. How about you, Tamara? Like, tell me about I feel your ancestry. I'm really curious about that. Do you want to just share with us like a little bit about your roots and origins to honoring?
You know, interestingly enough, that is one thing that I've never ever really taken the time to research, like the origins of All Hallows Eve and where it comes from, you know, for my ancestors, or even if we did celebrate it in some capacity. I'm sure that we did. We probably didn't call it Halloween, or, you know, right, like we do, but I'm pretty sure that it definitely comes from somewhere, right? And so yeah, you've given assignment to actually kind of look up the origins of where Halloween and if and how it shows up within, you know, my lineage and among my ancestors. So yeah, I don't really have an answer for that one, but I really enjoyed the history that you shared, because I too have Irish and Scottish and Celtic lineage as well among my ancestry, because I've done the ancestry DNA. And so having that piece of history was really helpful for me as well, to honor that part of my lineage, the well part of my lineage.
Beautiful. Yeah. And here's the thing. I thank you for your like transparency in that, because I did have to do the research a while back and still there's so much more myths, and there's still so much more origins. And so, you know, I invite you, if you're on, if anybody is here on the live or the replay, just type into the comments here ways that you connect with your ancestors, or that you understand from your heritage or from your lineages that you come from. Like, what are ways that you celebrate or practice on this day? And if you don't and you wish to connect with that more, also like say a few words about that in our comments. We want to hear from you, because this is a continual research into our roots and into our understanding of how we can honor the benevolent ones that are on the other side. Today in Mexico, Dia de los Muertos is Day of the Dead, and this is where I'm wearing the marigold flowers to over there in Mexico. These orange flowers are just offered abundantly all over. The altars are placed all over the towns, the cities, you know, the countryside. Like, you will just see abundance of marigold flowers. Supposedly the spirits really like that. It's a way of creating offerings in exchange to those on the other side. So it's really beautiful celebration and honoring, as opposed to, say, kind of grieving or denying that there's anything or any connection out there on the other side. So with that said, I want to just honor for a moment my ancestors and open this altar space I have. And then I'm going to ask you to share with us, Tamara, like how we can bridge that connection ourselves, like what you do daily and how you listen, and what type of ways that we can find a deeper communication. And if you're here taking a moment to ground yourself, I'm going to light the candle. I'm going to share with you. And this is just a little tiny shrine with, oops, oh my goodness, this is kind of embarrassing, but it's my little shrine altar. My grandpa Gallagher John Buonaugrio, Mary Buonaugrio. These are my ancestors, grandparents that have passed. I have more teachers too that didn't make their way on the altar this morning, but I have here some sacred waters, a sacred fire, and I'm going to just light a little bit of incense and symbols that helped connect to the beings that I work with, that I know are guiding me. So with that said, Ashe. Okay, Tamara, tell me, how do you bridge communication? Like, what has guided you to start to initiate that work with sisters? Maybe it's always been there. And what do you do like daily to really affirm that?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for sharing your sacred space with us. It was very, very beautiful. So honored to be a part of that space. And so, yeah, interestingly enough, my connection to the spiritual realm has been there for years. The first time I had an encounter, I was probably 5 years old. I remember laying in my bed in the middle of the night, and the way my bed was set up, it was like set up this way and the door was over here. And so I turned my head, and I looked out of the door, and I remember seeing this entity, this being. I don't know if it was well or unwell. I just knew it scared the holy crap out of me. And I remember turning my head and closing my eyes, asking God or whomever at that 5-year-old mind of mine had at that time to protect me and keep me safe. And I remember having a conversation with my mom, probably some years later, telling her what I saw. And she was like, oh yeah, I see that spirit. I've seen that spirit before. So in that moment, I realized it was actually a spirit and it wasn't a dream, or anything like that. And so that's when it began. But because of how I grew up, Black American, not really connected to my ancestry or my lineage, all that we knew and know, a lot of times in the Black community is that we came here from slavery and most of our ancestors came from the South to the North, or most of our ancestors are still in the South, right? Just being very transparent here. And so also attached to that, a Christian narrative, a Baptist Christian narrative. And so for me, all things astrology, all things spiritual, all things, anything other than what was in the Bible and how it was presented in terms of the indoctrination, the bylaws, is what I was guided under. And so when I'm thinking about how I never researched the origins of Halloween, right? It was probably because of the way I grew up, right? Just, it's a devil's holiday, right? Even though we went trick-or-treating, we wore costumes. And interestingly enough, I was always a witch. Every year, I was always drawn to that spirit, to that energy. And so, yeah, I just, that was my introduction into the spiritual realm. And so I stayed away from it for years. I would have the experiences and the connections, but I would keep it to myself because, like I said, I grew up in a Christian household. And although I knew my mom had the connection to the spirit world, she had the gifts when she was younger also, but she prayed it away because she had an incident that scared her so much that she didn't want to have that connection. And of course, we talk about intergenerational patterns and things being passed down. She kind of passed that fear down to me as well. Stay away from that. That's hell. That's not God.
Can I ask a clarifying question? So this was your mom who was also receiving a message from an entity, but she was too scared to talk with it or communicate with it. Is that correct?
Well, yeah. So from the time she was a little girl, she would see entities and energies and spirits, right? Growing up. And she, I guess because of, again, that whole intergenerational conditioning and indoctrination of religion, she just kind of kept it to herself. And then when I got older, then when I had my experience, I told her about it. And then that's when she opened up and started sharing different experiences that she's had. But she prayed it away, or she kept it under wraps a lot because of her Christian upbringing as well, and being affiliated with the church and so on and so forth. But interestingly enough, today she is still very connected to the spiritual world. She can still feel and sense the energy connections. She just never really fully allowed herself to embody the gift, still because of the Christian religious indoctrination. She still resides on a spectrum closer to whatever that belief system says for her. And so as I got older, you know, I was very in tune, but I was still a little bit leery of seeing and touching and talking to spirits. The only way that spirit was able to convince me to reside in this space of ancestry that I am now is my grandmother Tootsie. Her name is Tootsie. Her biological name is Rose Campbell, and that's where the Tamara Rose comes from, because I'm named for her. And so she's no longer in this particular physical realm. She transitioned, I don't even know how many years ago, because I didn't commit it to memory. But the night before she transitioned, I mean, I know this now, I was sleeping and I woke up and I felt this deep, heavy presence over me. And when I opened my eyes, it floated off to the side. And she was sitting there with her arms like such, and she was just nodding and smiling. And she had come to see my new apartment, because I had just moved back to Flint, Michigan, where I'm from. And I had wanted her to see the apartment, but because she was sick at the time, she was never able to come and see it. And so the next day, we went out to the assisted living facility where she was living, hospice care, and we found out that she had transitioned. But the interesting thing about it, when she came to see me that night, she had on this beautiful green gown. When I got there that morning, she had on this beautiful green gown. Nobody had ever seen the gown or anything. And I was like, wow. And so it was in that moment that I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that they sent Tootsie to me, because they know that that was the only way that I would embody my gift of connecting to the spirit world, because she would never hurt me. I had no reason to be afraid of her. I knew that she loved me and would take care of me. And so kind of having her blessing or her guidance into embracing that gift is kind of how I got into this space.
Beautiful.
And that was, yeah, that was probably, yeah, that was, I can't even, like I said, I don't know how long it's been, but yeah.
That's beautiful. I love that name, Tootsie. That's such a deep, beautiful experience to have, like, and I know that many of us have had different experiences like that. I know a lot of people that I am in field with also connect to beings on the other side, or ancestors that have come at different times. What would be, no, I have two questions for you. One is, how do you utilize that relationship daily?
Everything I do, anytime somebody always asks me about my ancestry, I always default to Tootsie, like she's the only ancestor that I have. But because of her benevolent energy, and because of the fact of the relationship that I had, I was definitely closer to her than any of my relatives. I grew up a lot at her home, and we share a lot of the same characteristics and demeanor. And I know that she knows, or that she knew, that I had the gift. And so when I look back over my years, I know that she was cultivating me for this work that I do, but I did not realize it. So yeah, I always honor her in everything. And then I also will honor my well and benevolence ancestors, both known and unknown. And my warrior as well.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, that reminds me of, well, I wanted to also ask this audience, like, what ancestors or relatives do you have the most in common with? Do you notice, like, oh, I take after that uncle or that great grandfather? For me, like, I definitely take after my grandfather, my beautiful Daniel Gallagher. He that's him on his boat that he used to ride. He usually comes, you know, and he traveled around the world and would sell leather, buy and sell different leathers. He had this leather business. So his house, certain parts of the house, you know, in the attic, like, oh, he always had this smell of like fresh leather. And so nowadays, that's how he visits me. Like, I get that smell, like, of leather, and I know he's there, and then the presence of him arrives in the room, you know, and I feel him in my heart like that. And I know that he's communicating with me. Nobody can tell me otherwise, right? So there are ways that those, and I had the most in common with him because I'm also I'm like the one in my family that's like the world traveler, you know, like the seeker, you know, the one that's like, yeah, keeps that spirit alive. So there's ways that I've always been like, oh, I really connect to that grandpa, you know. My question is, how would you invite anybody out there to initiate initiate communication with their ancestors on the other side in a way that is safe, in a way that feels safe. You know, we all have those fears of what we might open up to, what we might hear, feel, especially if we have like traumatized ancestors. Like I know for myself, just a little thing, I feel grief when I hear like really old Celtic music or people singing in like Gaelic languages. Sometimes like I just well up in tears and grief, and you know, like I feel that there's pain there in my ancestry, and I have to breathe to let it in, you know. So I don't know if any of you have had experiences like that, but I just want to share that piece and see what wisdom you have to impart on us and how we can open up and establish a better relationship, or begin to.
Yeah.
And it might be with somebody that we know or we don't know on the other side.
Yeah, definitely. You bring up a really, really, really huge, important point that I always share with individuals when they start to want to take this journey into the other realm, right? And that is to make sure you are aware as best as you can of who you're calling into your space. Because when you open up the door to the spiritual realm and start to call, as we say in our lineage, call down spirits, right? You start to invite any and everything into your realm, whether that's well or unwell, benevolent or not so benevolent, malevolent energies, entities, spirits, and not just your ancestors, right? You invited a whole host of energies, or what people like to refer to as ghosts, or those who are maybe newly transitioned, or who may have died a violent death but haven't transitioned to the other realm yet, still roaming the earth, find a way to make it to that other realm. And so we have to be very careful. And so I would encourage people to be very transparent, to also have a conversation like I'm having a conversation with you, right? With your ancestors, because I speak very openly, very honestly, very bold, and very, you know, frank sometimes when I'm speaking with my ancestors. And when I call them in, I started again, like I said, with my grandmother Tootsie. She was the very first one that I began to kind of really visit with and talk with. And then I started calling in my ancestors, benevolent and well ancestors that are known. And because of course there's a whole lot of my lineage that I have no idea that existed prior to me, but I know they did because I'm here. And so I always ask for benevolent and well. And then when I'm thinking about protection, I do call in my warrior spirited ancestors, but also those who are in a space of protection and that will do no harm to me. I ask them to come forth. And usually in order to kind of get their attention, I will make a noise. I might clap, I might shake one of my rattles, but I do some type of indication to let them know that I'm beginning to call them forth. And then I don't know if you can see it, but that's my altar. One of my altars. I have 3 right now, but that's one of my altars in the background that I work with very frequently. And I have all kind of things on there that represent my lineage, my heritage. I have pictures. I have my ancestry chart on there, and I have things from various parts of my ancestry that I'm connected to. And so, yeah, and then I also thank them. You know, I feed them and I thank them for the work that they do and the connection that we have and the relationship that we have. And so we call that an offering, right? So what do I offer them? It just depends. You know, it depends. I will offer ancestral money that, you know, and I will burn altar. I will also, right now, I have some fruit and coffee and bagels on there because my grandmother Tootsie, she loved coffee. That's how I started drinking coffee. And so you offer them whatever they love. It could be tobacco, it could be a song, it can be a dance, it could be, you know, some type of food or whatever the case may be. And then also sometimes I leave the offering, but then sometimes I sit there and have a meal with them or have a drink. You know, and when I say drink, it could be a glass of wine or, you know, rum or anything like that. Because my grandfather, you know, he liked rum, you know, and so I'll sit and drink. So it just kind of depends on who and what I'm working with, because sometimes you have to call on specific ancestors for specific type of work or specific type of energy that you need whenever you're making that connection.
Thank you. Yeah, I always get goosebumps when we talk about this kind of stuff. I feel the spirits that are here with you and guiding us here. You know, when somebody says, you know, ancestor, I think one thing I wanted to just I want to just respond to what you were saying is like, we think of a deceased person who we have a blood connection with. And, you know, this can also, though, it doesn't have to be limited to somebody that, like your grandma who you knew who passed over. We have spiritual ancestors, and it could have been a beloved teacher, a mentor in your life. Like, that's like so important for me to honor my teachers. And I've had a few of them pass on recently that were, that acted, you know, as a grandmother, grandfather, caregiver, anyone who has played a significant role in your life, animal, you know, that it was a pet. But you want to make sure that you're inviting in ancestors that are loving, helpful, and in good spirit, in good nature to, you know, your will and to what you want to, what's the word? Harmonize with, right? If you're calling in an ancestor that was like, he was a drunk and a gambler and, you know, this or that, you might want to be really clear about, you know, if you're calling in an ancestor who is hurt and traumatized, I want to say, yeah, there's a time and a place for that, and you want to be kind of well versed in your spiritual work. You know, come to me or to Tamara before you do something like, yeah, there's this time and a place to connect with those hurt ancestors and to want to create a space of grieving or healing or Ho'oponopono prayer. But before you do that, like, please, we want to make sure that you establish a sanctuary of protection, and that you understand what you're calling in, how you're working with it, and how to call it back out of the space, right? So I think it's important to know that, like you said, you want to be careful about what you're inviting in. I believe that working with beings on the other side, benevolent beings, especially entities are like, just like humans. I believe that the entities, the souls that have passed over, some of them have high spirit and intention, and some of them don't. Same thing like humans. If you look at humans in different communities and cultures and colonies of how humans colonize, sometimes around spiritual beliefs and practices, some of them are lighter and some of them are much denser, right? You want to like go to the spiritual ghetto because so with that said, I think it's important to just be mindful of all those beings. And sometimes it's like, yeah, a hurt ancestor comes in, we feel that we've been carrying it through our own habits, our own maybe perpetuating health issues that have been passed genetically. So what would you say, Tamara, for somebody maybe working with a very stubborn health issue, or like maybe even, like, I'm trying to give example, but like maybe your great grandfather was a gambler, you know, and then you find yourself, like, nobody passed or taught that to you, but then you find yourself getting involved in gambling yourself. You know, it's kind of like an unconscious tendency, and it starts to drain your life force energy and you get into trouble. Like, what would you do with something like that? How might you address that?
Yeah, so if I had a client or myself even, and I found out there was some type of pattern or a mindset or something that was in my ancestral lineage, once I identified it, I would begin for myself, I would begin seeking out the support and the resources that I needed to be able to heal it first. Because as we heal, right, we heal our lineage and we heal our legacy as well. And so I would begin doing the work that I needed to do, whether it was, you know, some type of talk therapy, whether it was getting Olympia or some type of a cleansing, whether it was doing some type of energetical, I would begin doing the work that I needed to do in order to heal myself first. And then again, as I began to heal myself, I would begin to heal my lineage. And I would do the same for my client, or recommend the same type of a protocol for my client. But I will also definitely recommend that if they were in any way connected to that particular ancestor, that they may want to put a barrier of protection or create a safe space around themselves, because what could potentially happen is that ancestor, trying to continue to work with that ancestor, will continue to keep them stuck in that cycle of energy, because they don't know how to safely remove themselves from that pattern, or remove that pattern, or extract it, if you will, from their DNA lineage, right? And so I would stop the work with that ancestor until they know for sure that they were able to engage in that relationship in a way that did not cause them any harm, if that makes sense. So we would do a lot of
Beautiful. I love that. I love hearing that. Yes, harm to none, goodwill to all. And yeah, we do want to be careful about calling that in, and as in a way that could perpetuate the pattern. I also wanted to speak from a very like mundane practical place, if you find that you are suffering from unhealthy cycles that might be passed down through, you know, intergenerational trauma, or, you know, genetically we pass the stress of traumatic events, like for example the Holocaust is something that, you know, a lot of Jewish people still, like, they carry in their blood and bones and, you know, beliefs, and every breath that they take, they're still carrying those ancestors. For me, it's like also growing up in Salem, Massachusetts, the witch trials that went on there, and the association to, of course, being hung as a witch in my past life and being born there again to carry out some of that karma, going through different injuries that cause neck pain, and remember being like hung. And there's all these things that I've, you know, experienced, and maybe it's a story, but maybe it's also connected to an ancestry or a past life. You know, we all have these, what's the point I'm getting at? I had a good point. Now I'm kind of losing my train of thought. Get help. I'm just going to say, like, get help for yourself. You know, it's not just going inside and doing like a meditation and Ho'oponopono. Like, yes, that's good. You know, having an altar and having your tools for protection. I work with obsidian. I work specifically with the obsidian eggs. It's a very protective tool. Men and women can work with it. Primarily the females come and do that work on intergenerational healing through the wombs and through the blood and through the whole immune system, you know, and so it's grounding and protective. So they're tools that we have. Tobacco, you know, maybe lighting some sweet grass. I got some here. So having that altar feels important for a spiritual place to have a communion or to maybe open a relationship. But I want to also say, if you're suffering from health issues or unhealthy relationship patterns, whether with other people or to, you know, tobacco or gambling or alcohol, get help. Not you reaching out for help, like physical help, like therapy help or 12 steps, or just asking for what you need, that you're doing that for all of those that have walked before you that did not have the strength and the courage to reach out for help. Like, I feel it so deeply as I speak it, you know, it's like you finding the courage and having that vulnerability to ask for that means that you're speaking out not only for yourself, but your ancestors, and you will clear the way for the future generations to come as you reach out to find the resources that you need to support you in these really turbulent times. We can't just be standing and pointing our finger at the ancestors and blaming them for what they passed to us, because these are gifts. Some of them are inherited genuinely, where we just have these like, oh, I'm a painter and I'm just naturally a musician, and my grandma and grandfather was like, those are great gifts that are of, you know, benevolent forces and goodness. And then there's like gifts that come in the form of wounds, and we have to really do the work to extract the medicine that's in them. But I felt like this core piece that I wanted to impart is, if you find yourself really stuck and binded, reach out to me or Tamara, or go ahead and just reach out to the resources that you have. And if you don't have resources, you ask for that, you know, communicate it and pray and cry out for that which you need in these times. And I really truly believe that those answers can come real fast.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned to reach out for help, because especially it's important that we talk about that, because oftentimes folk don't want to reach out for help. That's one thing. But the second thing that's important is that those things, some of the things that you named, like the altar, the meditation, the yoga eggs, and, you know, even the energetical cleanses and things like that, those are tools, right? Those are tools to support real healing work that comes from digging deep and spiraling in and having conversations with folk who can help you kind of rework and rewire, you know, your neurological pathways as well as your DNA encoding. And so it's so important to understand the difference between a tool. They're amazing tools, right? And that also it should be consistent work too, right? For me, what I've in my work around my ancestors is that it's about the relationship, right? Because oftentimes people want to light a candle, they want to hold an altar space when they want something, right? And think about it, in the physical realm, we don't like people coming to us the only time when they want something. We would get sick and tired of that, and we would feel some kind of way. And so it's the same with our ancestors. They want a relationship with you that they may have had on the physical realm, or that they may have not had the opportunity to have because we just don't know who they are, or whatever the case may be. But for me and my experiences, it's been about that relationship. It's been about getting to know what type of offering they like, getting to know their wounds and their trauma, so that we can then in turn heal our lineage and heal our change our legacy, you know. And so sometimes it's just sitting with them in the space of honor, reverence, and just deference, right? And offering them just an offering, not because you want something in return, you want them to work on your behalf, but just offering them something. Like I spend a lot of time, like I said, at my altar. I spend a lot of time. There's a beautiful historic cemetery across the street from me, one of the very first in Atlanta, Georgia. It's, interestingly enough, it's also a Confederate. It's the main Confederate cemetery here in Georgia. And so the side of the cemetery that's the Confederate side is absolutely beautiful. It's amazingly beautiful. You get the African American side, it's not as beautiful as it could be. And the whole area of the cemetery where all of these ancestors are buried, not one headstone, no grave marker or anything. And so I spend a lot of time there giving them offerings, communing with them, feeling their pain, understanding their story, and seeing what I can do. Because the thing about me is that I know that I was chosen for this. Some of us fall into haphazardly because we've tried everything and there's just nowhere else for us to go. And so we're like, oh my God, let me just try some ancestral veneration. And then there are those of us who have been chosen specifically to change our lineage, to heal our lineage and change our legacy. And I know that I'm that person. And so that, for me, means understanding a lot of the ancestral wounds and traumas. That means sitting with them, hearing their stories, asking them for their guidance, because they will guide us. And when I haven't spent enough time there, and it just happened to me right before I got on this live. So I have 3 altars, and like I said, upstairs, and I haven't been spending as much time at that altar as I should have been spending. And so they literally told me, like, we up here, don't forget about us. You spend a lot of time at this altar down here and the one in the living area, but you don't spend as much time as you should upstairs. And we don't feel as loved in terms of the beautification of the altar, right? And so I'm like, okay, I hear you. You all are right. I'm so sorry. So they will let you, they will literally sit, when you are so in tune with your ancestors, they will literally sit you down and let you know, hey, pay us some attention because you have been neglecting us. And they will let you know that. And so I also have been saying to them that I'm going to like redo that altar, because sometimes you have to shift the items on the altar, take some things out that are not applicable anymore, add some things that are applicable, and kind of keep the energy flowing, because the energy at the altar can become very stagnant. It can become old and all of these things. That's why I say, from my vantage point, that building a relationship with your ancestors and ancestral veneration, especially when you think about an altar, it's an ongoing relationship. And then here's the other thing I want to make clear too, that you don't always have to have an altar to commune with your ancestors. You can commune with them anytime, anywhere, because I could be in the car and just start having a conversation with them. I don't have a quote unquote altar set up in my car. And then the altar doesn't have to be super elaborate. It can be as simple and as whatever as you want it to be. And then I would also say, unless you are a part of a specific religion or belief system that has a rule on how you set up an altar, you set it up according to how you feel, or how your ancestors direct me. Because you have some traditions, especially when I think about, you know, the African traditional religions, they say, place this deity on this altar with this ancestor, or the altar needs to be facing west, or it needs to be facing east. It needs to be all these things. And at that point, it's like, who wants to remember all that and has time for that? So when it comes to my ancestor work, I do what they tell me to do, nobody else. Because when I'm listening to them, that way I'm getting it right.
Thank you. Oh, that's so good to hear. That's affirming. That just, it's you know, self-affirming. These relationships that we have with ancestors, with our spirit guides, with benevolent beings, I feel so strongly that when we are really, let's just say, humble and in tune, and not seeking something outside of ourselves, like not seeking outside of ourselves would be like asking them for something, like you said, or wanting some type of superpower, psychic powers from, you know, having this relationship. If it's just really coming from a lucid place like you said, of gratitude, of giving back to them. Like if your relationship, if you can really, I think what I want to, close with and affirm is that as you come into right relationship with those beings, then that fine tuning, like you can hear them communicate, and that's where that communication and blessing comes from, and it affirms itself through the symbols or the way we all listen in different ways. Like you might get an auditory sound, or you might actually visually see your grandma show up in the bedroom, or you might get that smell of leather like I do that affirms that like you're being spoken to, and it, like only you know it inside of you, whatever it is that you need to affirm that relationship is there and established, and no one can take that from you. So I just want to say bless that. And thank you for imparting wisdom with us today, Dr. Tamara. I do want to close with a gratitude for our ancestors and for those beings that are visiting us. And then maybe you could let us know how we can stay in touch with you. I'm going to unmask myself for this moment.
Okay.
Of gratitude, because the mask is very itchy. Ooh. Hello, ancestors. Okay. I just want to take a moment for all of you that are here watching this, that have ever felt a connection to your ancestors out there, to beings that are on the other side, that are in honorable working spirits, those connections that you have felt. Also, any of the pain, that grief that you have felt from those beings as well. And just taking a moment to hold space for all of those beings in your heart without needing to let them in or call them in space in this moment, just to take a moment to ground yourself and know in your heart that there's space in your heart for these beings that have walked before you, that it's not without the love of those ancestors, not just the love of your parents coming together and, making love, but the love of your grandparents coming together and making love, and the love of those before you making love and making future, generations. Like it's that love of your ancestors that allows you to be here today. And so just taking a moment to thank them, not only for your own life, but for the lives that they have lived and all that they have passed through, all of that they have endured, that they have survived, and also holding space for the mistakes that they have made because of their pain or their fear or their lack of knowing. Just taking a few breaths, thanking them purely for existing in any way, shape, or form that they have needed to. And if you'd like to, just in allowing and letting them know that you're here for them with an open heart, that any attachment or need for it to be a certain way. We open our mind, our possibility of deepening in all of these relationships that serve us towards our highest purpose and wisdom, all of these relations that allow us to understand and know and anchor ourselves in a deeper love for life and Creator. And we'll just soft smile out to all those beings. So imagine yourself smiling and just letting them know that you're here and that you love them, that you see them in ways that maybe they have not ever been seen before. And so it is.
And so it is. I feel led, if you have a few moments, to just do a very quick offering.
Yeah. Me or you?
You, do you have a moment? I'd love to do an offering on our behalf.
Yeah, please do. Please, please.
I probably should put this on the floor. Uh-oh. I'll move it down here. All right. And so I'm just going to make an offering to our benevolent ancestors, our well ancestors, both known and unknown. And this is something that people can do. Want to make offerings, a financial offering, using ancestral money. to pay for any karmic debt or for the ancestors to use it in the spiritual realm, however it. And so what we do is, if we are just making an offering, we fold it away from us. And if we are requesting something, then we fold it towards us, right? And so since I'm just making an offering of love, of gratitude, of thanks, and all of those amazing things, just to say thank you, just to show respect, to show love, and to show deference, and just to venerate for being in this space and place, and for being there for us and leading the way, and for their guidance. So I fold it 3 times, and I say whatever it is I'm going to say, or however I'm going to petition. Light the match.
Can you give
and
an example?
Benevolent. Okay. So this is for, I submit this offering on behalf of ourselves to our benevolent ancestors, both known and unknown, near and far, wherever you have been, wherever you may be going, wherever you are. I submit this to you in a space of gratitude, a space of love, a space of deference and honor. Thank you for coming before us, and thank you for being with us, and thank you for going thank you for going with us. And I just want to say thank you on our behalf, and we ask that you just continue to lead us and guide us and protect us and just keep us in your every way. And so it is, and so shall it be. Ashe. Amen. As above, so below, so within, we give thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So, and typically they state that the higher the flame, the better the offering. And usually, I don't know if you all can see it, but somewhere along the lines to denote offering or to indicate that the offering has been received or accepted, you would see a green in the flame, and there was green in the flame, and especially as it continued to burn down in the cauldron, there was green. So that would indicate that they received our offering, that they're well, and that they're pleased.
Oh, I love that. Beautiful. I'm going to that one. That's a beautiful takeaway. We can all give and receive more money, energetic, and to all of those possibilities of how we can communicate with them. I will say it does not just need to be this time of the year. It can be every day. Yeah.
Yes.
So thank you so
because it's a way of life.
Exactly. And like you said, like, oh, you were chosen to carry this, like that's your way of life every day, breathing it, living it. And so I hope that we have imparted you all with some inspiration and deeper thinking, deeper considerations of how you can make this part of your daily life, and that this can bring more abundance, more gratitude, and more deep connection to how you live and breathe. All right. Have a beautiful day, and let me know how you feel, what your thoughts are, and what's coming up for you as a result of watching this today.